Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, CEO Innovation Roundtable. My name is Dave Cupar, and I chair the intellectual property practice at McDonald Hopkins. My focus personally is on working with clients on IP strategy and solutions for innovation leaders, as well as IP enforcement and dispute resolution strategies. I am very lucky today to join with me two amazing people. Jodi Berg, who's the CEO at Vitamix Corporation, as well as Julie Smolyansky, the CEO at Lifeway Foods. By way of background for each, I'll start with Jodi. Jodi's a fourth generation president and chief executive officer at Vitamix. Vitamix is 99 years and running in business and is a family-owned company that manufactures high performance, the best blenders in the world, both commercially and household. And so does a lot of amazing things for a lot of amazing people for close to a century now. Since joining Vitamix in 1997, Jodi's directive at that time was to lead the company's overseas expansion. Jodi did an amazing job with that. Through her innovations and on behalf of the company, Vitamix at that time was only present in a few countries. Under her leadership, Vitamix expanded to since then to more than 130 countries all over the globe. Vitamix has truly become a famous worldwide phenomenon and cultural brand under Jodi's leadership. Since then, with that growth, Jodi's went on to become vice president, then president in 2009, followed by CEO in 2011. As for Julie, Julie became the youngest female CEO of a publicly traded company when she took over Lifeway at the age of 27 in 2002. Since then, Julie's continued the company's growth trajectory with creative food product development and marketing to bring kefir, the company's flagship product, to the U.S. mainstream. So it's gone from a little-known brand, a little-known product line to something you see in pretty much every grocery store in the United States of America. Also, under Julie's leadership, the company's expanded distribution throughout the United States, Mexico, into Europe as well as into Central and South America and the Caribbean. She's been named to Fortune Business's 40 Under 40, Fortune's 55 Most Influential Women on Twitter, as well as one of the top Instagrammers of the 40 Under 40 list, and recently named a 2020 Champion of Wellness by Very Well. And so today we're going to hear about how the companies here dealt with the pandemic, how they led innovation efforts through the pandemic, and where they view innovation going in the post-corona world. Before we begin our dialogue, what we'll do is show a video too, and I think the videos will be important for everyone to see for this reason. It's important to get a feel for culture, and I think culture is going to be a big aspect of the discussion we're going to have about innovation, not just about how we deal with things like a global pandemic, but how we get stress tested. You know, what changes do we make, or how do we stress test the things we do from an innovation standpoint that only show the core values that we live are the correct ones. So with that, we'll start with our videos here.
The very first guiding principle of ours is we passionately believe in making the world a better place. If we could change the way we eat, we could change our future.
I'm going to give you a demonstration of the Vitamix machine.
Vitamix was started by my great-grandfather in 1921 because in his mind and in his heart, this is how every household in the world could eat healthier and it would taste fantastic.
Here's to your health. Delicious.
This is how we can change the way the world thinks about food.
I wanted to make people feel good. And the Vitamix gives us the ability to do things beyond our imagination.
I've had a Vitamix since I was in 7th grade. I bought one with my babysitting money. I can put everything I need into it, so I make sure I get enough protein, enough fat, enough carbs, everything in one meal. I love my Vitamix.
I use a Vitamix blender in the work that I do a lot. It's been a really great tool to show the fun side of cooking and just how you can totally let loose and like throw a bunch of different things in a blender. I think that's the part that the kids love the most. And when you get those light bulbs to go off and have them connect to food and being able to unlock that potential for a really awesome life, just an amazing thing.
Over the years, I honestly don't think I've ever used a different blender in any restaurant that I've worked in. And that just shows durability and dependability is very important. And the Vitamix blender does that for us.
Food has the power to fuel our futures, and when we ensure that the next generation is fueled and healthy, we are also ensuring a healthier future for us all.
Join us in helping make the world a healthier place. Together, we can make a change that will last for generations to come.
Jodi, give us an understanding, and I think it's better, frankly, instead of hearing something preset, it's better to hear it from you while we're watching these great clips. You know, tell us about you. Tell us what you're made of. Tell us about what your role is as CEO, and tell us about what you do to lead Vitamix on a day-to-day basis.
So as you're watching this video, what you're seeing is many of our customers. These are the people that are using our machine, not just for their own benefit, but they're out there inspiring others. It's purposely why we picked these particular clips. This young lady, she's out teaching students in schools the value of whole food and why you want to make choices about what you eat. And the Vitamix became just a critical component of how she gets that message across and how she inspires young people. So we as an organization we're actually in our 100th year. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2021. And it's over those 100 years that the number of people that just gravitate towards Vitamix, and we gravitate towards them when they're out inspiring people to understand that you don't have to be a victim to what you eat. You can actually use the food you eat and like this message Julie's going to share as well, I'm sure, but the food you eat is your fuel. And we just wanted to share in this video that it's been about inspiring others to eat differently for over 100 years.
That's great, and it's a great message. You're right. At the end of the day, from an innovation standpoint, the message that resonates with me from a Vitamix standpoint is that it's not just selling. You know, the easy way someone can look at Vitamix, or when they hear the brand name, is to think selling a blender, and that is not your mission. That is not what Vitamix is about. Is that fair, Jodi?
It's so fair. If we just wanted to sell a blender, then our blenders would probably be in the same price category as everyone else, and we would take out all of the technology and the innovation that the only reason it's called a blender is because it looks like a blender. But in reality, the way that the shape of the container and the way the blades are designed, how they interact with the motor, everything down to even the angling of the blades to ensure that we can get this vortex that you're seeing right now, that how it processes food. It blends, it chops, it grinds, it kneads bread dough. It does so much more than just blending. And if we wanted to be a regular blender, we wouldn't be a privately held company that's trying to change lives.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll turn it over to you, Julie. We'll watch the video here.
For many of us, life has come to a standstill. We wait, unsure of what comes next. But there are those who have kept moving so that we get the care, treatment, and nutritious food we need. The countless heroes and sheroes in the middle, holding life together and delivering for us when we need it most. At Lifeway Kefir, we recognize every brave and helping hand, those who rise to the challenge and do what needs to be done. Moving us forward takes guts, and we love yours.
Well, what you're seeing is a commercial that we launched right as the pandemic was happening or starting, the very beginning of it, before we really knew much about it. You can see we're all mostly wearing masks. Some of this was shot even before, way before masks in the first few weeks of March. What you can't hear is a ukulele that my daughter was playing, and she did the music behind it. And some of the images were my daughter's, you know, just kind of as the pandemic was starting, and me in the plant, in our manufacturing plant, and just starting to process what we were going through. And the idea of the commercial, it's a thank you to essential workers, to the people who put their lives on the line to come in and show up and keep our nation's food system and food supply secure and safe. And, you know, in those first moments, in those first weeks, it was incredibly traumatic. Nobody knew what was going to happen, what was happening. We were all just making the rules up as we were going along. There was zero leadership from any government authority or any information sharing or advice on what to do. And I mean, even our local, you know, manufacturing, like food inspectors and the people who are in our plants, nobody knew what to do. There was no guidance. So, you know, I have to say that what I learned through this again and time again is to follow my gut. You know, Lifeway is about gut health. And for 2,000 years, kefir existed because my ancestors followed their gut and they followed their intuition. And, you know, they believed that kefir helped them feel better, that they intuitively knew in their gut that kefir helped them feel better. Kefir originated in the Caucasus Mountains over 2,000 years ago, where my ancestors are from. And my parents brought this product over with them when we immigrated. We were refugees and we came from the former Soviet Union, settled in 1976. We were the first of 48 families to settle. And you know, my parents entered into the food space and started selling Slavic foods to immigrants that started to come in the late 70s. My mom opened the first Russian deli in Rogers Park outside of Chicago. And that started our food business. And the reason I go back this far is it's got so many combining forces to kind of bring us to this moment, to today, and leadership. And the thing is that I remember in 1979 when the Chicago historic snowstorm, I was 4 years old, and this epic snowstorm hit the city. And within hours of announcing that this was going to be this historic snowstorm, all of the milk, bread, cheese, eggs, and toilet paper were sold out all across the city. And there was lines for gas around the gas stations. I remember this so vividly as a kid. And my mom had already started her deli and launched it. And she got wiped out. There was nothing, not a wafer left on the store shelf when this snowstorm hit. And I remember my father always talking to me about the snowstorm, even now when I was an adult. And he always said, you know, when there's a crisis, the first things that goes are the essential products. And we are an essential product. And he always told me that we are recession proof, that health is number one. And we are just starting to understand how important our health is. And, you know, in this time when the pandemic hit, I really, and my team, really felt why we existed, the purpose. We got to live what we write on those mission statements, what each one of us talks about, you know, what's our mission for our corporation? Well, my team got to actually live out their purpose and really feel it. And I can't even tell you what it was like to come into the manufacturing plant in the days of March and to see the team and to see, you know, the tears in their eyes, in their feeling of a sense of responsibility to do this. You know, they don't work in the military, they're not doctors or nurses, but they're, you know, honest, hardworking people, loyal, hardworking people with hearts that, you know, the biggest hearts. And their mission, our mission, is to help bring food to people's table, but not just any food, good food that helps heal our bodies, that helps bring immunity to our communities, to our families. And, you know, that's where, you know, it all just kind of came together, all the forces. And through leading in this time, it was mostly about following our intuition, following my intuition. And, you know, I didn't have to do too much cheerleading or rah-rah talking or pep rallies, because everyone was there with the purpose to help keep food on people's tables. And when we saw empty shelves across the country, I never in my life thought I would see what I saw in March on shelves, on food shelves. And I'm sure we're all shocked, and those images will be lasting for us for many years to come. And I think it was really traumatic. I think that we haven't even started to process what that looked like to be Americans and to see grocery stores empty of dairy, meat, toilet paper. I mean, the fear, the panic, how that felt, that there's a lot there to unpack. And the people who put that food there, who continue to show up, the supply chain, truckers, food packers, grocery store shelf workers. So that commercial, that spot that you saw was a thank you. And, that we love all of your guts, that it takes bravery to get through what we're going through right now. It takes bravery to be an essential worker. And we wanted to just continue to encourage all those essential workers and our communities.
That's a great story. And actually, I'll turn it over to you, Jodi, in the form of a question, because the thing that resonated with me based on Julie's background, two things. One is that at a high level, there's such similarities when you think about the genesis of Lifeway and the genesis of Vitamix, those stories, where tough times call for tough measures, and you double down and you break through it, and you develop a business that goes beyond just the products that you're selling. The other thing that resonated with me with what Julie said there, and I always believe in long-term stress tests in terms of culture and what you're about, is purpose. One thing that resonated right there with your story, Julie, and I'll turn this is where my question goes to you now, Jodi, is this. I think that one of the things that does jump out with respect to the coronavirus, with respect to this pandemic, is what's our purpose, either individually, as an organization, as a society, right? And Julie made a great point about Lifeway's purpose through this pandemic, its roles and what it cared about and what really pushed it forward. Tell us about that from your viewpoint. How did you sense that sense of purpose on behalf of Vitamix, on behalf of being a CEO and a leader?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. I'm going to unpack it a little bit. There's a lot of, in fact, all of us have been on seminars where we've heard people talk about all the things that they did when the pandemic hit. And what I think is most relevant is not all the what's anymore, because we've done the what's, right? And we've learned a lot from the hows, and innovation is how do we do something different and what can we apply going forward. But one of the things I think that we have hardly even begun to unpack as leaders is the why and the relevancy of the why we do the things that we do. So Vitamix has a very strong culture, and we have a very a strong why. Our purpose statement is to liberate and nourish and zest for life. It's not about making machines. It's not about making blenders. It's about nourishing life. And that applies to the products that we make and how we run our company and how we interact with each other. So one of the things that fascinated me when this whole thing hit, now we had a bit of a heads up because we do have relationships with people in China for components that we need to assemble our products here in Northeast Ohio. We also had some tooling that was being made in China. So, and we're in the technology and the innovation space. So it was at a technology conference in January that we had our first heads up about what was happening in China, and our radar went up, and we were able to start preparing, pulling some of the orders that we need forward, that type of thing. But I think what's more impactful for us, and through my lens as leader, was what's happening to the people in China, because I knew that if this went global, that what their world was like would impact our world would be similar, right? And it struck me that as leaders, we have the amazing opportunity to, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we spend most of our time at those top levels. Like, people already feel safe and secure, and they feel like we get to help them feel like they belong, and we get to help them feel accomplished in what they achieve. But what was happening with the pandemic was that got completely flipped. And in a very, very short period of time, as leaders, the ones that were able to respond, I believe, the fastest, realized that how accomplished people feel right now is completely irrelevant. We needed to go back and say, for our organizations, how do we make sure that they feel safe? How do we make sure that they feel secure? And it wasn't just a physical safety and security, but this impacted people emotionally and psychologically, and that was that has the ability to shut people down if they can't. And that's what Maslow is all about. Is like if you don't have these basic needs covered, you can never get to a point where you're actually contributing externally. So as early as February, we started to ramp up our communication with our employees. And we, when we had in Ohio, we had the stay-at-home order kick in, and everyone, you could tell, was just, they were afraid. They didn't know what to expect, and they didn't know what it meant for their lives. Were their kids going to be living with them, or their grandparents, their parents, like what was happening? So that very first week, we went all the way down to the bottom of the needs pyramid, and we just said, we are essential. We were considered essential because of the category of products that we manufacture, but it didn't matter that first week. Just go home. Just take the week. Figure out how to make sure on a personal level that you're safe and that you're secure. And while they were at home figuring out where they're going to get their toilet paper, or where people are going to live or work, we went into our facilities, and we asked if any of the employees wanted to volunteer to be a Tiger team. And we got together right there with these people that were a part of our Tiger team and said, okay, let's look at this facility through the eyes of somebody who is terrified of something they can't see. And how do we make our facilities such that when they come to work, they can feel safer than they do at home? And our goal was to create a zero germ transfer environment. And we said, what can we do? And then how do we empower our entire workforce? We hire very smart people to say, every one of you in your workspace, whatever you need to feel safe, we will help facilitate and make that happen for you, and allow people to create that safety that you need. And we slowly walked them back up the hierarchy of needs, right? So once they can feel safe and secure in their space at home, then let's help them feel safe and secure in their physical space at work. And once they can be emotionally safe at home, let's help them be emotionally safe at work. And we just worked people back up, and within just a couple of weeks, we had manufacturing back up and running, and we were able to produce machines. And then we had to go from our facility down into our supply chain to make sure that all of our suppliers knew that if we were essential, then the products they're making for us were essential. And if they're essential, then how might we be able to help them bring their employees back up to a place where they could be feeling like they were contributing as well. It all boiled down to the fact you couldn't do it that fast if you don't already have a rock solid culture in place and a rock solid purpose where you can say, okay, let's rally around everyone. Our purpose is to liberate and nourish the zest for life. And you can't have a zest for life if you're afraid, or if you're unsure, or if you're insecure, or if you don't know what's happening. So let's get back to that. It's not new. We're not making it up. It's not a logo. It's not marketing. It's not HR. It's who we are. It's our DNA. Let's get back to that. And then we empowered people to say, look, make sure that happens in your daily life.
That's a powerful story. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Julie, with the same idea. You know, it's already a year, which is amazing in and of itself. You know, that January into February, this is becoming a real thing outside of China. And then by early March, this is a real thing in the United States, and it's going to hit all of us and impact us dramatically. And that was, you know, just a story for years to come. We'll tell our employees, our children, our grandchildren, no doubt. Julie, how about you? In terms of when it went from February to March, this became a real thing, and we're going to have to deal with this as people. You know, we heard there from an innovation standpoint, Jodi going in from that inside out, right? How do we start with ourselves? How do we start with our families? Our families being our coworkers, being our families and their families, and then continue outwardly toward our supply chains, our customer base, et cetera. Tell us about your story there, Julie, and about a year ago.
Yeah, it's very similar to Jodi. We had some business in the UK, and where I was watching, those numbers and data coming out of the UK. And I actually remember the exact day when I heard that coronavirus ended up in the United States. It was a year ago yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday. And I had heard about it, in December and, just on the news, but thought that it was going to be under control. Really did not think it was going to come here. And I thought that we would be able to get it under control. I also actually have some experience with public health and vaccines and pandemic and whatnot through, I had done some work with the UN Foundation Global Entrepreneurs Council. I'm one of their members, and I was invited on a trip to Kenya to do a polio vaccine campaign and drive. We were very close to eradicating polio. There's only about 230 cases across the country, or across the world. And as I got to learn about pandemics and why we engaged with the rest of the world, and we engage with the rest of the world in third world countries, and we have NGOs on the ground, not just to be good and do the right thing, but because it's information gathering for us. And it was a lesson about why we are in other countries and why it's important that we have an active State Department and active NGOs and work on foreign aid and all of that, because then we will prevent these kinds of things in the future. Like, if you think about the last 5 pandemics, they all originated from third world countries. And so, number one, it's really important that we as leaders are engaged, and that's something that I learned, and use some of that insight from my experience to then help us at Lifeway. That was number one. I followed information on the UK. I saw that in the UK, kefir was up over 300%. And then the first week of March happened, and Jodi, maybe you have a booth at Natural Products Expo West too, but this is the biggest trade show for natural foods in the world. I've been going since I was a kid. We are one of the platinum sponsors. We have a huge space there. We are all over the place. My whole team is out there. We spend a ton of money to be out there. Every, Costco, Whole Foods, Target, Walmart. I mean, everybody who is anybody is there, whether they have a booth or they're attending. Target, Amazon. And we're already on the ground. Our booth is built. Everything, we're in Anaheim. We are rocking. And 3 days prior to the expo opening, the trade show floor opening, it gets canceled. And that was the biggest sign for me that this was not just a little thing. I mean, billions of dollars already set up, already teams in place, all canceled. Every corporate Costco said we're keeping everybody on the ground to manage inventory and supply chain. And then it really hit me that this was going to be a big thing. So that week, I gave a direction to my team to build out 7 weeks of inventory. If you know anything about perishable food, nobody builds out 7 weeks of inventory. We usually have 3 days of inventory on hand at any given moment. So 7 weeks for perishable, unheard of. And most distributors don't have more than a couple of days of food. Retailers no longer have warehousing or backstock. They have, deliveries happening every day. There is no warehouse. There's no backstock at any grocer. So this just to give you a sense of how much, supply chain and preparation we were doing and taking a risk to build out that much inventory. And it was all gone within 2 weeks. Within, less than 2 weeks, in 10 days maybe, and everyone was wiped out. But I will say that insight really, first of all, gave the team confidence that we were doing the right thing. We did not miss one case. We were shipping everything that was ordered as fast as we can. And I was actually just calling the CEOs of the distributors and really urging them to increase their orders, that they were not getting a sense of how big this was. This is another thing that going back to your gut, where I think we need to sometimes step away from the computer and think with our gut, because their logarithms at Amazon, at Whole Foods, at every retailer were totally wrong. They did not build out ordering logarithms for a pandemic, for a global pandemic. These systems were not built for that. There's no way to even put it in, and maybe they'll build a system going forward with this, because they were so dramatically off. You know, I remember calling the first week to some of the folks at, well, I won't name the brands, but they're big, very smart retailers that you think would have this down to a T, and said, you guys really need to increase your orders. And they said, yeah, we think that there's going to be a surge of about 8%. It was like 700%. It was just, and they were just unprepared. And the sense of urgency too wasn't there. It was like folks who are sitting behind a desk who are like, yeah, you know, our computer's saying this. Meanwhile, the shelves are empty and people are freaking out. So anyways, going back to like going with your gut, that, you know, sometimes the computers are wrong and the programs are wrong, and we have to also put our common sense thinking in responding. Things that we did, you know, mandating masks long before, about a month before there was a countrywide mandate, we were already, or not a mandate, a countrywide advisory, let's put it that way, an advisory. We were already mandating masks within our facility. We secured as much, you know, PPE that we could, and we're able to get the team comfortable. And like Jodi said, just giving them a sense that we care, that we are taking efforts to keep their safety in mind. We were already a food grade manufacturing facility, so a lot of the hygiene things we already have in place, and maybe some companies are just starting that process because they're not typically so focused on hygiene. For us, it's number one. So we were already ahead of the game there. And a couple of other interesting things we had, you know, remember when there was this idea that, you know, should we temperature test everyone? Is that legal? I remember joining webinars at your firm and other firms that said, you know, this is beyond privacy or, you know, employee rights or whatnot. This is about security and safety and keeping the greater security of the business and community safe. So go ahead and temp test. And that was really awkward, you know, to do that. We had to find ways to do that, building screens and, you know, creating some panels and privacy and whatnot. And even that evolved. We now have a machine that every person who comes in, it's an automatic temp tester. So it's not a human doing it. So they have that sense of privacy. The machine also tells you to put on your mask if it's noticing that you're not putting on a mask, that you have your mask is slipped. So it tells you to, you know, put your mask on. Every 2 hours, there's an audio system that comes through the facility that reminds people to put their mask on. You know, masks slip, they come down, we might take them down, forget to put them back up, like I've done it. So having those reminders consistently, it's not just for us, but it's for everyone's safety. And then, you know, translating a lot of the information. You know, we forget that we live in a multicultural universe, and not everyone understands the information, and not everyone's watching the same news source, and there's a lot of misinformation, and people are talking to their parents and their grandparents and their friends. And it's really our job to bring factual information for their health that they can then bring to their communities, their families, and share. So we've really tried to do that consistently. And I just wanted to also touch on mental health, like Jodi said. You know, we also saw a lot of folks like really freaked out, like mentally, just really scared. We offered, first of all, we acknowledged that and that we were all, you know, in this together and also scared. And we offered free mental health services to anyone who needed it. You know, we offered opportunities for folks like grocery cards, so it was one less thing that they had to think about, and just different ways to help relieve stress at home, whether they needed flexibility or support with childcare. You know, there were ways that we could help there. So there was a couple of things that we were kind of trying to build out, but it was all unique to each individual person because everyone had a different situation. Just kept the doors open for that customization for their position, role, experience.
A couple things there, and that both of you have raised. I mean, those are just amazing stories to hear in real time, and just the things you did. And Jodi, it's something you said. It was the 0%, or yeah, I think 0% germ transmission. Maybe I got it.
Zero germ transfer. Like create an environment where you can feel safer at work than you were at home. But before you go with the rest of your question, I wanted to jump in with something that Julie said about really making sure that you would address these needs at the individual level. And one of the things that I know you might be getting to this later, but I was just so proud of it is we recognized, I'm proud because of the people on our team recognized early on that in order to make sure that our employees that were coming in every day felt safe, they needed to make sure that their children and their spouses felt that they were safe. So we did a campaign where we had employees' kids submit posters of how to communicate to and remind their parents what to do when they're at work. So to remind their parents about being minimally 6 feet apart, wearing the mask, all of the things that the kids were learning about through school or the news, and they created all these posters, and we blew them up like massive big and put them on the warehouse walls to remind us all that these are our kids telling us, please keep yourself safe while you're at work. And so it really went into that individual, like each person's coming in a different place. We needed to figure out a way to collectively reach everybody individually wherever they were at.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
And I remember in those weeks, like I would come back from the plant, and before I walked into the house, and I have my hair in a ponytail and everything, before I'd come into the house, I would strip down and get undressed and run in and shower. I wouldn't touch anything or touch anyone. You know, I didn't hug my kids for weeks because I was so worried, you know, that potentially I would give it to them, and just even stayed away from my kids when I was, you know, really in the plant and running around to the stores and doing shelf checks. So yeah, it's, and I think what you're talking about, Jodi, we have the next round of the same kind of things that we have to tackle with the vaccine rollout. I mean, it's going to be a similar thing, and I'm already hearing a lot of misinformation in my plant and people worried about taking it, and should I or shouldn't I, and how are we going to get it to them and all of that. So we have another kind of hurdle to get through with the vaccines, and I think similar ideas, innovation, you know, communication is going to be necessary in this next part of this pandemic.
Two parts.
Sorry, Dave, for taking over your presentation.
The less I speak as a moderator, the better the presentation's going. That's how I view it. So this is fantastic. I actually have two parts where I want to go. Partly, in partly what Julie just said, because you're right. A year ago, we were dealing with how do we create as you said, Jodi, a 0% germ transmission environment, right? We do not want the transfer of this. And at the time, we didn't know much about what that meant and how this thing was even being transferred when you think about it. It's actually amazing looking back, the things we had to learn in real time. And Julie hit a point about the vaccinations going next. I'm going to save that second because I do. So there's sort of a two-part question. That's the second of the two. What are you thinking about that? Because there's information coming from everywhere. How do you deal with that as a leader? How do you continue to innovate, inspire, lead based on that? The first one, though, is this, something that Julie raised a minute or two ago, and I love this comment. No one built algorithms for a pandemic. Or, you know, another way to say it maybe is clicheically is, you know, you throw out the playbook, right? Pandemic sort of did that to us. We had a certain way of doing business, and I saw you nod there, Jodi, like I did too. We all did, like, oh yeah, you know, we all had that moment of, oh yeah, we got to throw out the playbook. And tell us a little bit. You know, did you have that experience early on about a year ago? And do you recall a specific instance or two where that was, you know, sort of there is no rule book for this. We got to create it now. And so give us a feel for that from a Vitamix perspective.
Wow, that is such a great perspective. In fact, we could probably do a whole session on that with so many companies out there that I could even learn from. What I found very early on is we pulled together we call it our crisis management team and crisis preparation team, which is a cross-functional group of people from all over the organization. And we were meeting daily to say, what's the pulse? What's happening? What do you need? What are you experiencing? And then being able to use the perspective from multiple different people. So we had real time where we were just surfacing up and writing the next playbook and implementing and executing on it. And then the next day bringing it up, did that work? And the way we were test driving our playbook, because you don't have time to do as much research as you would want. So we were meeting with our employees every day, sometimes twice a day, and we would roll something out, and then we'd say, what else can we do? What worked? What didn't work? Pull it together. What resources do we need? And then we would change it and ramp it up again more the next day if we needed to. And one of the things that I found, even in this first couple days of the meeting, was there was 3 groups of people, and they had 3 different playbooks that they were following. The first group of people were crisis. They just said, everyone's panicking. We just need to shut everything down. We just need to buckle down and use our reserves and ride it out. And then when the storm is over, then we're going to lift our heads again and say, okay, what's left? Maybe we can deal with it. And they had a particular playbook that they were bringing to the table, which was just buckle down, don't do anything. And I had the second group that was, oh, no, we can't use your playbook of buckling down. What we need to do is we need to quickly put everything back the way it was before. We need to assess the damage and rebuild it exactly the way it was before, and then we can figure out if something's changed. And they had a certain playbook that they were following. And then I had the third group of people that were really the ones that this group had to help bring the other 2 groups along to revise the playbook, to say, no, bringing it back the way it was isn't going to work. Buckling down and waiting for it to be over isn't going to work. We need to figure out how to be very nimble and inclusive and expand our ability to have as much diverse thought as absolutely possible from every single perspective. I think it's fascinating, and I know this isn't what the conference is about today, but I think it's fascinating that this is the same year that we had such a wake-up call on being equitable and inclusive and diverse, because I think it's the people and the organizations that already had that built in, that were able. I mean, we benefited from just incredible diversity of thought by bringing, including everybody into these conversations early on. And it just, for some organizations, it feels like a no-brainer. And for the rest of us and companies out there to be able to realize how significant that is, and for both of those to happen in the same year, is powerful. I don't ever want us to go back, right? I want this to be the opportunity for people to not be so reliant on whether that playbook is a literal playbook that's developed through the industry, or whether it's a mental model that we've developed about how we're going to look at things. Having a wake-up call to say, don't rely on that. Sometimes you have to go back to your gut, like Julie was saying. Sometimes you have to just look at the situation and bring in the diversity of thought and figure out the next step.
Yeah, and it's funny, when you started your first sentence there, the first word I wrote down was nimble, and you got to that word, and I'm not surprised. I had a sense exactly, how you were dealing with it at that time. That's exactly right, I think. And I want to hear from both of you about this one. To your point there, I think it's powerful about diversity and inclusion. And that is, I agree. I shouldn't be an agreeer as a moderator, but I have that same sense where the pandemic and the diversity inclusion element what we saw in 2020. I think there is a correlation, and you could argue strong correlation, even cause and effect, but at some level we could agree to correlation, right? So the question becomes this for both of you, from a sense of duty, right? So I think part of what the pandemic brings out is a sense of duty, and with innovation, how did you feel going into, and looking back now, reflecting on it, how did you feel about your organization, your employees, their sense of duty, their sense of willingness to go and roll with the changes, the nimbleness, if you will? Was there difficulty in your organizations to make those changes? Was there, frankly, pushback? Was it more of an esprit de corps? Looking back as leaders, do you feel great about that? Do you feel like, boy, you know, and understandably, even if it's less than great, at that time we were all dealing in crisis, you know, and sometimes you look back at crisis as an afterthought. Yeah, I would have done something a little differently. Where do you feel really good about the things you did as a leader, and what do you feel good about with your organization from a sense of duty? And maybe what are some things looking back, if hindsight's perfect in a hindsight's 2020 world, maybe some things you might have changed a little differently in terms of your leadership aspect or something like that?
Yeah, Julie, why don't you go since I was just talking?
Well, I am super proud of what we've done, how we managed and handled it, how we showed up for our community, how we communicated with our team. I mean, you can never communicate enough. There's, you know, you can do that all day long. I wish we could always do that more. But I wouldn't change a single thing that is what we did. I will be forever proud of how we handled it. I didn't get any pushback. Everyone was just rolled up their sleeves and said, what can I do? How can I do it? Here, I know this person, or with it, you know, everyone was doing what they could to help, and everyone was super nimble. Another thing I'm super proud of, this was, you know, part of the way that we showed up was, you know, I do a lot of work with like food insecurity issues, obviously being in the space. We know that when the Chicago public school systems shut down, that we have like 20% of kids in the system that are food insecure. We have 20,000 homeless youth in Chicago that are registered as CPS students. They rely on the school as their one source of nutritious food. We knew that there was going to be a nationwide shortage. We, on top of building more inventory for our own customers, we manufactured more inventory for food banks, for healthcare workers. You know, we were shipping product to all the food banks from New York, Austin, you know, San Francisco, you name it. Anyone who was working on any kind of organization of food distribution, we were making extra product and sending it out. So we have served over 250,000 servings of kefir since the pandemic started, just free, just, you know, as our efforts. And healthcare workers, knowing the impact of kefir on people's immune system and their mental health, these were the messages that we were out there communicating, that, you know, the kefir improves your mental health. There's a mind-gut connection. It improves your immunity. These are things that people really cared about and wanted. So we were, you know, working with hospital food supply systems and making sure that we could feed doctors and nurses who had no time to sit down and eat a healthy meal, and they could just get, you know, liquid nutrition. Like, you know, Jodi's also in the business of bringing that together. So, you know, I am super, super proud of some of those things that we've done and the team and how they handled it. And, you know, it was honestly a privilege. It was a privilege to do this. And I think everyone on our team feels that way. And I think that, you know, it's not a monolithic workforce. And, you know, there were people that needed to be in the plant, and then there were people that could do their jobs from their homes. And, you know, even accounting departments were able to do things remotely. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be learned from that, you know, what we thought we couldn't do, we were able to show that you could collaborate and have a team effort even remotely. And, you know, you can still do innovation with your team remotely. You know, that ad that the commercial spot that we started the program with, you know, that was all bootstrapped from my phone. It was literally images that were from my phone that when I did not think that it was ever going to be a commercial. It just bootstrapped it. The team put it together. We, you know, just so you know, the innovation and the speed to which we can do those things I definitely think are moving at record speed. And we've all grown from this. I mean, you just think about the use of online grocery delivery systems. That's up over by 500%. I mean, it was something that just kind of chugged along at a snail pace, and people like maybe sometimes used Instacart and the Amazon deliveries, but now it became a life source for us, you know, 500% increase in volume through online deliveries. Baby boomers, took to it, which we never thought. And a lot of people say that they'll continue using it, that they now see the ease with which they can use these kind of programs and platforms and, the apps, and they can get an extra 2 hours of their day back. Things like that. I mean, and I think it's going to create some new, and I'm maybe going off into other questions that you had down the line, but I'm just kind of jumping in, thinking about like how things are going to change and where there's opportunities. And I think, maybe instead of the large concert that you might go to at Madison Square Garden, it might be a smaller, intimate kind of thing somewhere outside or, whatnot. Like, we're just going to evolve to new things, new ways. There's declines in some industries, but there's also rises and opportunities in other industries. And, I always look at a good challenge as an opportunity, and whatever card you're dealt, you can play it and find the silver linings even in these moments. That's kind of what I think. Just think like human ingenuity takes over, and it's that sink or swim kind of, you're thrown in the river and you are obligated to swim even against really difficult currents. So I do think that's what's going to happen. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but I also don't think that we should be hanging on to like a return to how it used to be. I think that things are going to be different.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jodi? Duty, that sense of duty, the sense of change with that, both as an individual, as a CEO, and organizationally speaking on behalf of Vitamix. Tell us about that from your perspective.
Yeah, so I'm going to step back a little bit and a little bit of history. I became the president CEO right before we went through this massive growth, right? But I had never been a president or CEO before, and I didn't really know how to go about it. So when we experienced this rapid growth, the one thing I did know was that when I felt a connection to the purpose of why we were doing something, then I overcame all obstacles and I would make things happen. And I also realized that when I'm living with purpose, I have this incredible sense of fulfillment. So the way I navigated the growth at Vitamix several years ago was since I didn't know any other way, I said, well, what if every employee felt a sense of connection to the ultimate destination, the ultimate purpose, and then they would make decisions that would get the company to that purpose and they would overcome all of our obstacles. Well, flash forward and we get to a pandemic. I don't know how to lead through a pandemic. And the one thing I do know is that when I'm really clear about my why and I'm focusing on getting to that destination, that I'm willing to overcome odds, and I'm incredibly creative because it's not about doing what I did before. It's about figuring out how to get to that final destination. So we already had that as part of our culture because we've been through it once before. And we have part of what defines us is one of our business objectives is to live our values for the benefit of, and then we list all of our stakeholders underneath that. And a second core element is this understand the why we do something before you change it, and then change it, right? As long as you know that now maybe the why has changed, but if the why hasn't changed, then you can, and you have a better what you can do and you have a better how to do it, then those are fair game, right? Just be careful you understand the why. So when all of this hit, we were able to quickly go back to our DNA and say, everything has changed. What we do, how we do it has changed, but why we do it hasn't. And every one of us is empowered to just align on the why and then make the changes that need to happen. And the other thing that I could not be any more proud of is this living the values for the benefit of. So everyone who had key stakeholders, the group that was most, that their stakeholders were the employees, they buckled down and they said, okay, let's make sure that we take care of our employees. And then our customers that were really facing with the customers, they put themselves in the mindset of the customers. Okay, what do our customers need? Let's make sure that we take care of our customer needs. And the group that was protecting our brand and who we are as a company, they looked at that and they said, okay, now let's make sure we understand the why that we do things as Brent, and let's do that. So without trying to, everyone quickly, and I think naturally, like when you exercise a muscle, the reason that we exercise certain muscles is so when we need those muscles, we have them and it's not really painful, right? So we've been exercising the muscle over the years of making sure we truly understand the why. And we've been exercising the muscle of make sure we understand who our stakeholders are and that their voice is in the room and that we're doing it for them. And those are two muscles that when the pandemic hit, boy, I'm just so grateful that we had those muscles in place, that we have a really powerful why, that we have a strong culture of being outward focused and really taking other people's needs into consideration, because it was those muscles that everyone in the organization quickly deferred to and used to navigate us through it. And even customers, we interact with customers all the time. We had our customer care area of our companies right here in Northeast Ohio. We don't outsource it to another country. It's right here. And when we had the stay-at-home order, we easily could have had that department shut down, right? Well, everyone in our customer care said customer compliance or protecting their information is absolutely number one. Let's figure out how to do that and work at home. And within 24 hours, they figured that out. And we took our entire customer care department and gave them the opportunity to work from home where they felt safer. And all of our customer information was still protected and we were PCI compliant. I couldn't have done that. None of us could have done it alone. It took the team coming together with a laser focus on our customers want to know that we are protecting them. Even in the middle of all this, they need to know that we're protecting all of the data that they've given us and that we're stewarding. And let's figure out how to make sure we do that and work from home. And so that's just one example of the hundreds that I'm like Julie. It's humbling to have been a part of it, and privileged is the other word that you used, Julie. I'm so privileged to have been a part of this particular team and all of these amazing people that work at Vitamix and the choices that they made and how they chose to make them.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I was just going to touch on, Jodi, what you were saying about, the workforce and crisis. And what I was thinking as you were talking was how, similar to you, like when I took over our business, and I see a question sort of related to this, but I took over when my dad passed away suddenly. He had a sudden heart attack at the age of 55, and actually McDonald Hopkins, it was Harris Kessler Goldstein. Rick Kessler was key in helping us navigate that. But what I thought was that I remember leading through crisis before, and how this pandemic was so similar to that moment where it was a crisis. And I felt incredibly comfortable and familiar with it. I felt like I didn't even miss a beat. Like, I've been here before. Crisis is in my DNA, and I know that we'll be able to get through this. And the question that I see on the chat space is, what was the first message that I wanted to get out to the team? And that continues to be the same message, is that failure is not an option. There will not be failure. I don't even know what failure is. I don't view anything as failure. I view it as opportunities to learn and lessons and things that you can, use to guide you to a different North Star or whatever. But failure is not an option. And I think that women, from the beginning of time, through the beginning of time, women lead in crisis. Women have really incredible, untapped, intuitive knowledge on crisis. It's in our bones. And we lead in crisis in our families, in our homes, in our communities, in our workforce. And I think the tragedy out of what has happened in the pandemic is the fact that if you read, I'm sure you all read the recent job report, we lost 140,000 jobs, and women were 100% of the ones who lost those jobs. What a tragedy for American corporations to lose this brain knowledge, this intuitive knowledge that women face, especially as we're talking about how families and teams are going to go forward. You know, women are at the key and the center for all of this. We are the essential workers. You know, think about nursing teams, women. You know, I can go through all these various industries, and women are the key of all of them. And I don't think that our, you know, businesses and corporations are giving women that credit. And another thing, even in like just in executive teams, you know, what I saw was in the beginning days of the pandemic, and when panels like these started to crop up on what to do and how businesses go forward, I can't tell you how many times I only saw white men on the panels. This has been a thing we've talked through for years and decades. You would think by now we have learned something, but it was sort of like, oh, there's a crisis, there's a pandemic, girls, ladies, move over, let the boys take care of this problem. I mean, I was invited to go to a panel where it was 7 white men all on the panel, 7 white men CEOs. And I wrote the organizational note and said, there's a lot of women, there's a lot of Black and brown people that are leaders, that are important to bring to the table. You know, these panels should look like our communities look and be mirrors, and we should get that insight. And they were like, thanks for noticing. It was an oversight on our part. Would you like to join the panel? And so I did join it, but I just wanted to applaud you for bringing 2 women to the webinar to get our perspective. It never ceases to amaze me how many times people just don't consider that to be an important factor when we're talking about these things and kind of creating thought leadership opportunities and whatnot. So thank you.
Jodi, what do you think? I mean, I'll give you, we're at the 2 o'clock hour, but take as much time as you need. I'm going to give you the last word here, Jodi.
Well, I'm not sure how to follow that, except that it really encapsulates what this whole year has been about. One is, as a world and a society, we have to be inclusive and we have to be diverse. That's where the great thoughts came from. If you think about if early on we had a diverse group trying to help us figure out how to navigate this as a country, I don't think it would have gotten nearly as bad as it did, because now we're dealing with pockets across the US that have been hit, cultural pockets and ethnic pockets that have been hit so much harder than others, because we didn't have them at the table to say, what's your world looking like? How is your world different than the world next door? And we can't assume that this solution is going to affect another one. But if you take it within organizations and say what we did before is, there's not one fix that's going to go across all industries. There's not one fix that's going to go across all these companies. Then you take it to the individuals and the family level, and there's not one fix that's going to work for all of us. So I think this year, when we look back, is going to be a one of reflecting on, get to your roots, figure out what's truly important and what the key influencers are. Now, you happen to have 2 people on this panel that understand the value of whole foods and how our food interacts with our body and the role that our gut plays, right? So we can't leave this discussion without saying that that's been an aha for so many people, to say let's really, instead of getting caught up in the moments and the activities and the events, let's get back down to the gut, the root of what's really important. And for our bodies, what's really important is what the food we choose to eat and how we choose to treat our bodies. For our organizations, what's really important is that we recognize that the different people that make up our organizations are unique and have individual perspectives and needs, at the same time do have a purpose that they can achieve on this planet. And if we can create the symbiotic nature of our amazing employees with the purpose of our organizations, the power that can be created and energy that can be created within organizations, and then we can apply that to our communities next. I think that if we pay attention, if we take the time to reflect and really understand these core root elements of what's impacting, what's affecting something else, cause and effect, we will look back at 2020 and say that was the beginning of some fundamental amazing shifts that have taken place in our organizations, in our individual lives, in our communities, in our countries, in our world, that hopefully generations from now will be able to say thank you to us for doing that.
That is a perfect ending. And I will say this, not to put you both on the spot, but I think we should all get together in the fall, the three of us, include potentially some other panelists. And over the next few months, there's going to be continued rapid change, and reflect on these points that we're making. I think at two levels. One, to continue to stress test it to see where are we, what are we getting challenged by, and how are we doing with it. And then also as things change around us too, to see where we're at there. This has been absolutely incredible. And I think everyone who's watching and listening will feel the same way. So Julie, Jodi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Jodi, I was just gonna say, Jodi, I wanna do a collab with you with Cupar and Vitamixes. We should get our marketing teams to do some kind of, social media collab, recipes and whatnot. So
absolutely. So everyone that's watching, wait,
you heard it here.
We will come together and we will help you even more than we already are. Stay healthy, everybody. Take care of your gut. It's
yes.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And we will follow up. The video will be available. Julie, Jodi, thank you again. So I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.